there's this myth that like, oh, all you have to do is like eat salad and go to the gym. We know that that is simply not true. Your body will fight with all of its might to keep us at at a baseline.
Welcome, y'all. It's my favorite podcaster, Donna D, and the Urban Mommy Podcast. Make sure y'all subscribe and share. Tell a friend and hit that bell to keep up with the latest updates, because you don't want to miss what my girl got to say. I'm just saying. The Urban Mommy Podcast. Let's go.
Hello, everyone. This is your girl, Donna D, aka the Urban Mommy, and I am back with another podcast. And Happy New Year to everyone, because if you are watching this, this is the first podcast of 2024. So, welcome to the new year. I'm glad we are here. Today, I am joined by Miss Nicole Christina, and we are going to have a great dialogue today on eating disorders for midlife. Some of us, we have some young and old on the channel, but most of us are in a 30, 40, 50 range. So this is going to be something that you may want to listen to. And even if you are younger, you still want to listen because you want to be able to notice when the signs come before they actually come so that you can be proactive. Okay, so welcome, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me, Donna.
Of course, thank you. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Nicole Christina. I am in upstate New York, far, far away from New Orleans. Hence the wool. I'm a psychotherapist, and I have been for 32 years. I specialize in eating disorders, disordered eating, body image stuff. There's a whole spectrum of issues. And I'm also a podcaster. My podcast is called Zestful Aging. And I wrote a book on podcast interviewing called Not Just Chatting, How to Become a Master Podcast Interviewer.
That sounds interesting. I need to read that. Okay, so you've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years.
Yes.
Did you always focus on eating?
I focused on women's issues. My training was very female focused. And I got really interested in how the culture can have such a profound effect on how we see ourselves as women. And so that was kind of like the logical, place that I ended up. And also some of it was a bit of a business decision because there wasn't anybody else in my town, or there weren't many people doing it. And I live in a university town. I'm up at Syracuse University area. So I also knew that I would fill a need. So it was kind of twofold.
Okay. And I know usually when we think about like eating disorders, like back in the 90s, people usually thought of like bulimia and stuff like that. We don't typically think of overeating, but overeating is also a disorder, correct?
It can be if it gets in the way of you living your life, right? So if the way you deal with stress is going out to the stores and buying all the bad food, so to speak, and you can't participate in a social event or a family event, or you're so anxious, then that can certainly, I mean, there are diagnoses, binge eating disorder, for example. But yes, I mean, anything that really kind of takes you away from your life and becomes such a preoccupation, like, oh, wow, I really need to get a big box of cookies, and that's all I can think about. It's so distracting. It takes you away from parenting, takes you away from, if you're in a partnership, takes you away from your work. It just becomes such a all-encompassing that it makes your world very, very limited.
Okay, so can you tell us about like when you first started, like when you first got into it?
Yeah, I mean, I was a pretty young clinician then. I was in my 30s. And I saw a lot of people from the university. And as I got older, um, my clients got older along with me. And I started noticing that people who were starting to look at retirement or who kids were launching, all of a sudden it seemed like there was kind of a big hole in their lives. Like, now what am I supposed to do? I've been like a teacher for 30 years and I've really devoted myself to my job or my family, and now everything is shifted, right? And I'm not sure what my life is about. And so it's very seductive, right? I mean, we're surrounded by these messages all the time, depending on your ethnicity, right? I mean, there's definitely different messages, although every single kind of race and culture can have eating disorders. There are different messages about what your body's supposed to look like depending on, where you come from. But so if you can imagine somebody saying, oh, you've been working out, you look great, it's reinforcing. You can say, oh, well, now I'm really going to spend more time at the gym. You get recognized. And when your kids have launched and when maybe you're at the end of your career and you're wondering what do I have to offer, it's very it's just kind of sucks you in. And then you might try a diet or keto or whatever. All of a sudden you might lose weight, and then people give you a lot of attention and it feels good. Everybody loves to have attention, right? And so then you can kind of get down into the spiral. Then you can't find your way back, because now your life has just become, I'm not going to eat white flour. I'm not going to eat white sugar. I'm not going to eat all this stuff. And it can be a real, a very lonely phenomenon and very painful, because you can imagine, I mean, and I know you're in like one of the best places for delicious food. If you can't go to a party because you're afraid of having something like a gumbo because it has sausage in it and that's fatty, it really has a way of just ruining your life.
That's true. So I know you mentioned sometimes, people say, oh, you look great. Have you been working out? And it can sometimes turn, negative in some ways. What about, now I don't know how, I know this could be a cultural thing, but I know sometimes, and I know in our community, we have like family members, they'll say, oh, Donna, look at you, you're getting fat, and they don't necessarily mean anything negative by it, but it's always taken negatively,
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's very different in the African American community. There tends to be more of an acceptance, or even that I certainly am not an expert, but from what I understand from my clients and my reading, a softer body is seen as attractive, more attractive. Whereas European folk, Asian folk, there's just a real weirdness about being skinny, and it doesn't matter how you get there.
Right.
So, it's complicated, because I think it depends on who you're listening to, right? I mean, if you look on Instagram, it doesn't matter where you're from. You should look a particular way, right? Look at Beyonce. I remember looking at her when she was doing a film about her life, and she had just had the twins, and she was talking about, like, what did she eat? Nothing. And she was saying, I got to fit into my, gorgeous outfit. She went on a severe diet. So she seems to have adopted some of the dominant culture idea that was beautiful.
Yes. right? And it's just what we see on TV and social media.
Absolutely. And it's more and more available to our kids, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what they're growing up with, and it's very damaging because the
Yes.
way you get to an unnatural weight is by fighting your biology.
Mm-hmm.
That does not do good things for your body. And in fact, it can have some really detrimental effects. Like, for example, if you restrict calories, your reproductive organs actually shrink. Um, and same with your brain. It actually shrinks because your brain is mostly fat. And if you're not feeding it, big problems.
Wow. So when you say fighting biology, that's what you mean when you say fighting biology, as in not feeding your body correctly?
That's right.
Oh wow. I was thinking, you know how some people say, "Well, I'm big boned. I'm supposed to be big boned." So is
Yeah.
that true?
People are all different shapes and sizes. And, you know, if you go into, and I think that that brings up a really good point, Donna, is that really what we should be focusing on is our health. So if you go to the doctor and you're in a bigger body and you've got nice numbers in terms of your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your resting heart rate, and you're like overweight on the charts, you really need to look at that carefully because your body's telling you you're healthy and you're thriving and you're doing everything you want to do. You know,
Right.
you're walking, you're hanging out, whatever, you know, maybe you're doing, you know, I was going to say some things, but they don't apply to where you are. I was going to say you can ski, you can do all these things. But you can take a walk, you can travel, you can do the stuff that feels good. Those insurance scales for weight, the BMI stuff, very suspect. It really has to do with how your body's functioning, how it's feeling. If all systems are go, that's what we should be really looking at.
Yeah. A couple of months ago, when the Ozempic thing got really big, I've been trying to get, well, I'm one of those people that, you know, I'm heavy, but I'm heavy, but I'm healthy. I literally have no major health issues. I don't take any maintenance drugs. The
Good for
only
you.
maintenance drugs I take is headache medicine. So I don't
Ah,
have anything wrong with me. So my doctor was like, "Look, you have nothing wrong with you. I can't give you Ozempic. She's like, you don't have anything wrong. So I just can't give it to you." So I mean, I was kind of upset because I'm like, I want to lose weight, but there's so many different conditions, and a lot of times people try to make fun and talk about people that because they can't lose weight, but there's like PCS, you know, there's thyroids, there's a lot of different issues that go on that you don't really know about. And it's hard, and it's really hard to lose weight.
if it was easy, Weight Watchers wouldn't be such a great
Yeah.
investment for Oprah, right? I mean, he is
Right.
making so much money, and if it works, why are we keep coming back again and again and again? It is
Right.
really hard. It's easy to lose weight. It's really hard to keep it off because
Mm-hmm.
our bodies are like, what's going on here? Why are, you know, that's not a healthy thing for your body to lose weight. It's like, are you sick? What's going on? We better get you back to your baseline. So there's this myth that like, oh, all you have to do is like eat salad and go to the gym. We know that that is simply not true. Your body will fight with all of its might to keep us at our at a baseline. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about, oh, why don't you just not eat, you know, sugar? It's not that easy. And if it was, 3/4 of Americans wouldn't be dealing with this if it was so easy. We have a lot of problems in our food system too, in terms of the processed foods are just really put in our face, and our body was not evolved to digest these things. It just simply doesn't know what to do with some of these weird chemicals, and often they're stored as fat. So if you want to be healthy, you would focus on, not eating processed foods, limiting white sugar. That will get you very far, and then your body will find its own kind of natural balance. But we are just inundated with these processed foods, and it really is causing such havoc on our digestion.
So what do you think about those fad diets?
I bet you can guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a petite woman, but I, eat well and I exercise because I really like walking my dogs and it feels good. And I'm just not willing to like not eat cookies or not eat a chocolate because it's not in my diet. I don't live off of them. But the fad diet is just what it sounds like, and that is you lose the weight, and then once you're not eating kale smoothies anymore, it's not sustainable.
Right.
Nobody can, you're all excited in the beginning, and then after a while, you're with your friend who's eating a hamburger, and there's no way to fight that. Your body will win every time.
That's true. So, what makes you focus on the disorders for midlife?
Yeah, that's kind of a fairly new development, and apparently it's becoming a real problem. And the reason we know this is because some of the places that treat eating disorders now have a separate treatment track just for midlife women. So it's a problem. And so, women are really feeling at midlife, kind of lost, and they're feeling maybe invisible, and they're feeling also a little bit more in touch with their mortality. They may be having stress with caregiving their parents or their extended family or their partners. And so there's stress, and there's anxiety around that. And one way to kind of feel better is to just focus all of your energy on, like, how many carbs did I have? How many fats did I have? How many calories did I burn at the gym? And so it just becomes this like little world of safety where you're like, oh, well, my mom is frail and I don't know when she's going to, get sick or die or whatever. But one thing I do know for sure, I'm having a smoothie with these 3 things in it. Then I'm going to go and get my 10,000 steps. So it kind of makes your life more manageable, and it just is a way to feel more comfortable. And unfortunately, what happens is then you start as the boss, and then you get into it to an extent that then you are no longer the boss. And all of a sudden, all you can think of is, I had a donut yesterday. I'm so bad. I'm so, and then on and on and on. And, I think at this age, we have wisdom, we have experience, we have smarts, and to waste it all on just thinking about, oh, I had a donut is just, in my way of thinking, really a huge loss.
I agree. So, how do they treat eating disorders? Is it like therapy, inpatient, outpatient? Is it medication? How do they actually treat it?
Well, it depends on how severe it is. And so I treat it outpatient. But if people are losing too much weight or too compromised, then they have to go to a higher level of care. But I think in a nutshell, we really look at, what is this doing for you? How is it helpful? Why is it so appealing to you to be counting your carbs, or to, I had a client who had an Apple Watch, as many people do. she was traveling, and you know how it is when you go across to Europe, you're like totally exhausted. Well, she had not gotten her 10,000 steps yet. So she got to the hotel, and you're all like, oh my gosh, what time it is. And she just walked around in her hotel room until she got to 10,000 steps. That is an example of it's starting to own you. It's starting to become such a focus that you can't like make good decisions anymore. So, we would look at some of that. We would look at some of the losses and some of the grief that this person might be dealing with, and really try to help understand how measuring your food, measuring your exercise, criticizing your body might help in some weird way avoid thinking about things that are really hard. Like, when you're 50 midlife, that this party is going to be over. We're not 20 anymore. And we know that, it's, there's a limit, and there's, death eventually. And the closer we get, the more and more we might not want to think about that.
Right.
So it's a great distraction. And then, as everywhere we go, there's a reinforcement of you have to look a certain way to be lovable or acceptable. And so it's so easy to fall into.
Do you see men in your practice, or is it mostly women?
That's a great question. There certainly are men out there more and more, because now the men's magazines are like, hey, you got to be ripped. You got to have a six-pack. You got to look like this. And they're like, I don't look like that. So it's kind of causing more problems with them as well. And everything, of course, is computer altered, right? There's a tennis player named Andy Roddick, and he was on like Men's Sports or something, and he said, like, whose arms are those? I don't have those muscles. I don't know who those are, but they might want them back. Those are not my arms. And so, it's a matter of selling stuff. It's a matter of selling weight loss drugs. It's a matter of selling cleanses, Weight Watchers. The money to be made, I'm sure you're familiar, it's just billions and billions of dollars. Having us feel some shame about ourselves is a big moneymaker.
Yes. So what I'm learning is that eating disorder is not just eating. It's not just eating. So like I said, initially I thought it was just like, bulimia. Then I thought it was overeating. But it's also the obsessive thinking about eating.
Exactly.
Or not eating.
Exactly. And what some people might do to compensate, which we may not recognize as eating disorders right off the bat, is they will exercise compulsively. So at first glance, we might be like, that person is so disciplined. Oh my gosh, they're so great. They never miss a workout, even when they're sick. That's a red flag. Like, you've got a bad cold. You need to be on the couch, not running at the gym, right? So there's a lot of ways that people get caught up in this. And they could call it like, I'm being really healthy. They'll say, oh, I'm really healthy. And I always have to ask, what does that mean to you? Because it might mean like, I never eat fat. I never eat sugar. I run 10 miles a day. And then we know that's not healthy.
Right. How does it typically manifest in younger people?
You mean like adolescents?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's a range of eating disorders. There's different types. Some of them are more about restriction and wanting to lose weight and appear, just focused on skinniness. Other is binging with some kind of compensation, like exercise or throwing up or taking drugs to throw up. And then other is just binge eating, which is you're binging, but you're not doing anything like over-exercise or anything like that. So it really depends on the person. It depends on the adolescent. But certainly, if we think about adolescence and all the adjustments we have to make, like if we're going to go off to college or we're going to get a job, I mean, it's like all this identity shift. It's similar with midlife women too, right? It's like, wait a minute, my kids are gone. They don't need me as much. My partner may or may not be here. We may or not want to stay together. My job is wrapping up. Who am I now? Really creates this vacuum that then all of a sudden you can find, sort of a reason, you feel like, okay, well, at least I have my eating disorder, or at least I have my diet, or I'm going to just, all I want to do is go to the gym, and then I'm going to eat organic kale. It's like just becomes like this small little world, and everything else disappears. Like your relationships, if you can't go out to dinner, like say with your friend or partner, without saying how many calories does that have, I have to run 10 miles to work off how much fat. I'm going to order fried fish. What are you frying your fish in? I'm going to order fries, but you got to bake them. But what are you I mean, you can see how it would be like, are you paying any attention to the person you're with? Or are you just so worried, that there's sausage in your whatever, dish, that you can't even focus because you're so wrapped up in it. It's very much, it just takes it's like it takes over your brain.
Okay. So what about in older people? Do you see anything with like older, as in like the senior citizens? Do you notice anything like that with them?
Well, they certainly are not exempt. It depends if they're feeling this void or this emptiness. Certainly people can. My grandmother, to the day she died, was like, I'm not going to eat bread. I'm like, really? Because you've gone through the Holocaust and you're worried about carbs. It just does seem kind of, you know what I'm trying to say. So certainly older people can be hyper focused, and there's this idea that somehow that's really healthy, right? Like, I'm going to be healthy, I'm not going to eat any fat. Well, guess what? You need to eat fat. Otherwise, the body is not going to function well. So I don't think older people are exempt from all of the messages of, you got to lose weight, you got to be healthy, they get anxious about that. They want to, do the right thing. So I don't have a lot of older people in my practice. But certainly I have people 60s, 70s, and they're like, I got to get out and walk. Otherwise, I'm going to, gain too much weight. It's like a equal opportunity problem, right? Because we're all live in the world of social, and we all watch Netflix.
Right. Speaking of Netflix, there's like TV shows and all this binge TV watching that we're doing. I'm assuming that does not help.
It does not help unless you're watching women of different sizes that act like they like themselves, right? I mean, there might be, it could be cultural, but certainly if you're looking at sort of the mainstream, you're not going to find many people who are over size 16, which is ironic because size 16 is the average weight for American women. So, you look at them. I was looking at, they were doing this Friends, thing. And I was looking at Courtney Cox, and I just thought, I don't know if that woman's eaten in the last year.
Tiny.
It's just, and some people are naturally like that, but it's a minority. And
Yeah.
so, it makes me wonder how she's living her life and how much she, I don't know, I don't know her, but that, like, how do you have to live to maintain that? And it can be a full-time job.
Is eating disorders, is that one of those disorders that are like, that's kind of like taboo, so people don't get help with it, or do people usually embrace it pretty
That's
easily?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. Certainly if you're making yourself throw up, that's not something you talk about at a party, right?
Right.
So the shame is definitely a piece of it. The other piece of it is if I'm restricting calories, I don't want somebody to challenge me and to take me off of that, or to say,
Hmm.
you don't look well. Are you sure you're okay? That's not well received because, again, this is something that people are using because it's helping. It's not, you don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'd like to have an eating disorder. That sounds
Hmm.
like a good time. So what people who are adopting these behaviors are doing it because it's a coping mechanism, and they
Hmm.
don't want you to mess with that. And so if you say, hey, I haven't seen you eating, or you got this plate for Thanksgiving, but all it has on it is salad and a radish leaf.
Hmm.
What's going on? That's not going to go well.
Do you tend to find that people that have these issues, does it tend to affect their relationships with other people?
Great question. You can only imagine, because if I'm going out with you and we're going to go to a party, no, let's say you say, hey, let's go out and get some drinks, okay? And so we go to your favorite place in New Orleans, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many calories. Oh,
Hmm. Yeah.
I gotta run. Oh, and you say, hey, you want to get some appetizers? I'm like, I don't know, like, what's in them?
Yeah. All that butter, no.
All the
Yeah.
is there butter? I can't eat butter. What about this sausage stuff that you guys love?
Yeah.
What about this gumbo? What about this? The cooking is so beautiful, and it's got this French, so there's creams, there's butters. I can't eat that. That's not on my diet. So
Hmm.
what happens? You end up what? Sitting
Right.
there nibbling while I'm just staring at you, and I'm all anxious and distracted. You're not likely to have a really lovely conversation because I'm all counting calories in my head, and you're like, well, this isn't that fun. This isn't what
Right.
I had in mind. Or let's say we're buddies and you make me a birthday cake. And I'm like, oh, wait, did you use white sugar in this? Well,
Mm.
yeah, of course I did, because it's a cake.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't eat birthday cake. That's way off my diet. I mean, how's that going to be a nice thing for your friendship?
Right. That's
Well, I
true.
can't
So,
go to the beach with you because I can't wear a bathing suit.
right. What about romantic relationships? Do that affect those as well?
Sure, sure. I mean, imagine, like, if there's any intimacy and you're so ashamed of your body, or you think that you're not appealing or attractive,
Yeah.
that would cause all kinds of problems. And
Yeah, the insecurity.
it's almost like it's you and your eating disorder, and the other person's over here, because it's just like you're more, in a sense, closer to your eating disorder than you are to another human. So it really interferes with your ability to get to know somebody, or to be intimate or be close, because all you want to know is, am I gaining weight, or what's going to cause me to gain weight? It really just is I would say it's like what's the word? Brainwashing. It's like
Mm.
a certain kind of brainwashing, and it takes you out of a healthy, balanced life, because that's all you care about. All you care about. And, you know, people I know who are so talented and so gifted, and they wake up beating themselves up because they had French fries. You know, they're poets, they're parents, you know, all they can think of is, "I had butter on my potato." It can really ruin one's life.
Yeah. What is I can't say the top reason, but what are maybe some of the top reasons, or maybe the most common reasons for eating disorders?
Right. Well, it's like we talked about before, is really feeling lost and maybe really needing something to latch on to make your life feel more manageable. I mean, we're all living in a world that is, you know, so terrifying. And then there was COVID, and there's just all of these external things, violence. I mean, all these
Mhm.
external things that make us wonder, like, can I go to the grocery store without having, you know, a near death experience? Um, and so people really need ways to manage their anxiety. And
Yeah.
this is an easy way, because when you're right into it, people compliment you, right? And they're like, "Oh my gosh, you look great. What are you doing?" And that just makes you want to do more. So what
Mhm.
I would say is, if you're in a position like you're an adolescent, or you're somebody in midlife who's about to go through massive adjustments and loss,
Mhm.
what else can help you feel more comfortable? Do you have a spiritual life? Do you have a cause that is near and dear to you? Do you have interests that you really feel great about? Do you want to volunteer? So that fills that vacuum of, like, what am I supposed to be doing with myself now? I have no clue. So that really helps. Um, does that make
Yes.
sense? Kind of fills the void of
Yeah.
why, what's the point of life?
Right.
And then if you're doing things like, if it's your church or your synagogue or your mosque, or you're doing work for justice, or you're doing helping stray animals, that makes you feel like life is worth living, and then you don't have to make sure every day you go on the scale to say, "Oh, I'm a success," or "I did something, worthwhile."
Okay. So what about a friend of someone who may have an eating disorder?
Mhm.
What
Tough.
advice do you have to them?
Oh boy, that's tough. I think you can expect them to thank you because of what we talked about earlier, that they're really wrapped up in it. I would make an observation that you're worried about them, that you notice that, whenever you go out, they don't eat, or they'll kind of push their food around, and you're just checking in and making sure everything's okay. You've noticed that, whenever you want to go out, they're at the gym, or they can't do it because they're exercising, or they're talking all about weight loss, weight loss. I've been good, I've been bad, all this stuff. To just gently say, I've noticed this and wonder if you want to talk about it, or, if it's something that is bothering them, what's going on, and to offer your friendship. But it's really tough, and there's actually been books written on, if you have a loved one who has an eating disorder, and it's really, especially for parents, it's brutal, because you can't force your teenager, right, to eat,
Mhm.
and it becomes a real power play, and it's very difficult.
Okay. All right. What is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions about eating disorders?
that it's all, if they're spoiled white girls that are, you know, kind of rich and don't have anything else to do. It's really hard for me if I'm like out in public and someone asks me what I do, and I'll tell them, and they will sometimes say, I wish I had an eating disorder. And I know they don't mean it because they're trying to be funny, but it is such a torture to watch these women, and it is so hellish to worry every mouthful, you know, am I gonna get fat? Am I gonna gain weight? You know, all this stuff. It's an awful, awful disorder, and it's the most lethal of any psych disorders. More people die from who have an eating disorder diagnosis than any other psych diagnosis. So I don't take that as very funny joke. So
Right.
I try to be polite, but sometimes I'm like, no, you don't. You don't wish you
Right.
have it. So I think that that's, you know,
Mm,
I think that the misconception is like, oh, you know, some people say, oh, just have a cookie or just eat. And it's, you know, obviously it's not that simple.
right. I'm trying to remember what I watched. I saw something on TV and a lady had an eating disorder and her body was just shutting down on her. It was horrible. In fact, one of the guests on my shows, something happened, and she was going through. It was one of the shows about narcissism. She was going with a narcissist,
Yeah.
and she had a something went wrong with like an eating disorder. It was one of the something that came with the narcissism that she was dealing with, and her body shut down on her, and she almost died.
Yep. That's what bodies do, right? I mean, it, it really hurts our systems, and especially, you know, osteoporosis is a big problem because if you're still having your period, oftentimes what'll happen is your period will stop, and so then that will create a situation where your bones become very brittle. So
Mm,
what you might see if there's somebody who's an adolescent who's really heavy into this, they have real problems with their bones. You might be, you know, kind of hunched over. There's
yeah.
just all kinds of problems when you don't feed your body the basics.
Nutrition.
I'm not even talking about super duper eat the color of the rainbow. I'm just saying
Right.
the basics. And
The
it's,
proteins and stuff.
you got it.
Yeah. All right. So if you can give if you have like a minute to talk to somebody who may be listening, who may think that they possibly have an eating disorder, they may or may not know, what would you tell them?
I would say that it's best to nip this in the bud. There's tons of programs. Even if you can't find a clinician or someone to talk to who specializes in eating disorders, I would look at support groups. I would look online. There's an organization called NEDA, NEDA, National Association of Eating Disorders, NEDA, and you know they have all kinds of resources. But the more entrenched it becomes, the harder it is to heal. So if they're just sort of noticing, hey, wait, I'm not eating anything that is sweet, or I'm not missing a workout, even if I sprain my ankle, I'm still doing it. That's the time to say, let me make sure I'm not falling into this spiral that's very hard to get out of.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. And you watch some shows, so you know my closeout question is if you could go back and talk to 17-year-old Nicole, what would you tell her about life and the things that she would be about to experience experience, sorry.
I love that question. I think that older life is great. I've been really excited. I mean, there's certain things I don't like, of course, right? Your body tends to do what it does. It gets somehow some parts of it are wearing out. But I'm finding that there's real freedoms that I couldn't take these opportunities when I was raising my son because I was so busy. And so it just gives me chances to try new things. and do things that are kind of exciting, maybe even a little bit adventurous. And that's really opened up a whole new world for me. So that's why I call my show Zestful Aging, because I'm all about bringing the zest.
Love it. Okay. So let everybody know how they can keep up with you, how they can follow you, when and where they can watch your show. Tell them about your book, just anything that you can tell them so that they can follow you.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, they can just go to zestfulaging.com. All my stuff is on there. I've got a whole bunch of freebies. My podcast comes out every Saturday. You can find it on all of the platforms, but it also runs through my website.
Okay, well, that's easy. So thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot today, and I know that I know that the listeners learned a lot as well. Like we spoke about, a lot of times these subjects are taboo, and
Yeah.
sometimes, New York is maybe I don't know, New York may be a little bit different. Y'all probably have a little bit more access to care, but in some of the smaller health markets, and even though New Orleans is not technically a small market, when it comes to health, it's extremely difficult to find therapists, especially ones that specialize in stuff like this.
Yeah.
It's totally difficult. It's, oh my God, it's so difficult. So the good thing is there are resources online that
Yeah.
you can utilize. So guys, if you do think that you have some kind of issue, please, look out, reach out, and try to, listen to podcasts, check out Nicole's podcast. There's
Yeah.
books.
There's
YouTube is my friend. That's stuff that you can listen to kind of help you.
My podcast is it's just a variety of stuff. So it's
Okay.
not about eating disorders, but there are some excellent ones. And let me just tell you, there's one called Body Psych, PSYCH. There's a ton of them that my clients really, really like, and they listen to them between our sessions.
Okay.
You have to shop around, right? Everyone has a different taste, but if you go on a podcast search bar and do eating disorders, you will find a ton, and I would highly recommend that.
Okay. All right. That works. Okay. All right. So again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for being here. Nicole, thank you all for listening to the end. I hope you all found something. And again, Happy New Year to everyone. And if the Lord says the same, I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.